It's my pleasure now to announce our final speaker for the day, Dr. Liz Nock. Liz is a senior clinical psychologist with over 15 years experience working in substance use treatment and a particular interest in the treatment of methamphetamine use disorder. She's currently the Allied Health Clinical Lead for the Alcohol and Drug Service at St Vincent, Sydney. As a 2020 NCCRED scholar, Liz developed and delivered the PsiMA trial, a pilot study of psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy for methamphetamine use disorder, acting as investigator and lead therapist.
I'm Liz. I work down at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, where we conducted the PsiMA trial on land that always has been, always will be Gadigal land. For anyone who hasn't heard me talk about the PsiMA trial already, the background and methods can now be found published here. But today I'm going to jump straight into our now final results. To paint a very quick picture though, PsiMA was a single-arm pilot trial, 15 participants meeting criteria for methamphetamine use disorder, 3 PrEP psychotherapy sessions, 1 8-hour dosing day with 25 milligrams of psilocybin administered, 2 integration sessions, and all of this with the same 2 therapists at all times. Our primary outcomes were safety and feasibility, and of course we added in some secondary outcomes of interest. So we screened 56 people for eligibility, and from this we were able to recruit the 15 participants that we were aiming for. Implementation of the intervention was also feasible, and so 14 who started the intervention completed it. Just quickly, our exclusion criteria was as you would expect for this kind of trial, but of interest, the one thing that was additional was the requirement to have a supportive friend or family member who could collect participants from dosing day. And this was quite a stumbling block. And I just mention this because it's really relevant to the practical application of this treatment, but also speaks massively to the considerations that we actually need to think about for this population beyond sort of cold, hard, days use on paper, withdrawal symptomology and that kind of thing. So here's the baseline data for our 15 participants. The median age was 42, 12 were male. There was a pretty high level of education attainment between them. All but 4 were in some form of paid employment. Median days methamphetamine use in the last 28 was 12 days, and the majority smoked, 2 injected and 3 smoked and injected. Because there's been some mention of ADHD as well, you see there was 4 who had a diagnosis of ADHD, and I think it was 7 out of the 15 that also screened positive for ADHD on the Wenda-Utah rating scale, interestingly. We also took a baseline measure of expectancy. Not surprisingly, given the current hype in the field, positive expectancy was scored quite highly and negative expectancy was moderate. We had no serious adverse events. Only 7 of the adverse events were potentially related to the psilocybin itself, and these were mild and resolved. Very importantly, clinical assessment and scores on the BPRS showed no indication of emerging psychosis. So moving on to our secondary outcomes. The graph on the left shows individual and median days methamphetamine use in the past month. So along the x-axis is study visits from baseline, start of PrEP psychotherapy 1, dose day, through to 90-day follow-up. So the first time point following the complete intervention is day 28. The right graph shows individual and median craving measured via a visual analogue craving scale. The craving measure on dose day that you can see marked there was taken prior to dose administration, so that drop that you do sort of see is actually occurred as the participant came into the room that morning to get ready for their dose, which is probably in keeping with the way we understand craving to work in the action stages of treatment. But it's interesting that it continued to drop and that was somewhat maintained at follow-up. I'm going to skip to go first. We also administered the MEQ at the end of dose day. This measures the intensity of the mystical experience that was occasioned by the psilocybin. It's broken down into those 4 subdomains. The MEQ scores overall were high. We had 79 participants who reported what the MEQ considers a complete mystical experience. This is particularly interesting as it suggests that the 25 milligram dose, which is a pretty common starting dose for PAT studies, was sufficient. So even in a population who likely have some possible tolerance effects to drugs and at least familiarity with altered states, this is potentially enough. And there's obviously some safety benefits to being able to keep the dose lower. A really key consideration during the intervention was that participants needed to have at least 2 days abstinent from methamphetamine prior to the dosing day. So in Australia, the majority of methamphetamine users don't use daily, more commonly in patterns of a number of days per week or month. But obviously we do know that daily or near daily users experience some of the greatest harm, so it's really important that we do have protocols that consider inclusion of those with the greatest need. PsiMA had a pretty representative spread. I think our lowest use was 4 out of the previous 28 days, and the highest was 28 out of 28. 2 of our participants whose use was at that higher end actually completed a planned inpatient detox prior to the dosing day. All of our other participants, though, planned to remain abstinent for the 2 days or more in the community, and they all achieved this. Participants were really, really motivated towards this clear goal, and this really helped focus prep sessions on a real shared understanding of patterns of use, triggers, experience of withdrawal, that kind of thing. And that can take quite a long time to achieve properly in counselling sometimes. So as a therapist doing this work, I found the success of that really intensely shared goal quite interesting. It's early days, but there are some important implications and considerations. PAT can be delivered safely to a MA using population in an outpatient setting. It's definitely worthy of further investigation for a population that has limited current treatment options, as we're hearing again and again. So I would say that future PAT research really must include methamphetamine use disorder. And this particularly for a population where exclusion is often considered for this sort of novel treatment due to a sense of perceived risk or complexity, and I don't think that's necessarily justified. Traditional evidence-based AOD counselling interventions appear to fit well within PAT, and I didn't do a slide on contingency management, but from my own experience as a therapist on the trial, it seemed to me that the main focus of the integration therapy sessions, so the post-dose 2 sessions, really was your classic behavioural therapy approaches, which of course contingency management fits well within, and so sort of that focus on harnessing motivation and doing something behaviourally with that. And then lastly, it is possible to deliver PAT to both intermittent and daily methamphetamine users, and future models must plan to support this. So all of the above is pretty timely given the media discourse around this type of treatment and the TGA rescheduling in Australia for PAT for depression, which I can't mention without a reminder that PAT across all indications, including depression, still has loads more to be understood about it with regards to efficacy, mechanisms, safety profiles, best practice models, and refining of trial methodology.